The wind tore through the hollow plaza, carrying nothing but the stench of rusted metal and burned trash. District 12 had been dead for years, its tram lines twisted into carcasses of steel, towers gutted, markets abandoned. Still, Seth Ruhr walked the cracked tiles as if they belonged to him alone, his boots crunching frost, his pack weighted with a week's worth of salvage strapped tight across his shoulder. He ignored the shadows watching him, merchants tucked into corners, their thin eyes following each passerby not for trade, but for weakness. That was when he saw her. A small figure at the far edge of the square, half hidden in the collapse of a column. She stepped forward into the pale gray light, and the wind carried her words as if they had been carved into the air itself. Just a warm meal for my little sister. I'll sell my toy to repay you, human. Her voice cracked, but did not fail. She was barely 8 by his measure, her violet skin ashen from hunger, her hair tangled white strands, heavy with dirt. In her arms she carried a bundle wrapped in worn cloth. The bundle shifted, a weak cry slipping out. The infant was alive, but barely. Against her chest, the girl clutched something else, to a doll, pieced together from trash fabric, stuffed, with scraps stitched carefully with lines that were too neat to be careless. Its eyes were mismatched. One button, one shard of blue plastic that gleamed faintly. Seth slowed his stride, the breath in his chest turning white. He'd seen children trade worse rings, shoes, even hair, but this doll was different. It was her last possession, the proof of someone who had once taught her patience, who had once cared. And she offered it like treasure, like it was the only coin she had left in a world that demanded nothing but loss. He crouched down in front of her, knees groaning from years of cold ground and endless marshes. He set his lantern on the frost, so the flame inside caught her face. Her eyes, wide and too large for her thin skull, watched him with defiance and terror mingled into one. He spoke low, steady, a voice made for calm, not threat. "What's your name?" "Eel," she answered, without lowering her gaze. She shifted the bundle, showing the infant's tiny face, pale lips pressed weakly together. "This is Nayli. She's one." Seth reached 2 fingers to the baby's forehead. Warm enough. No fever. Relief cut through him, though his face showed nothing. The infant's small hand flailed clumsily, catching the metal chip at his neck. His salvaged ID tag, worn smooth from years, swung gently in her grip. She clung with surprising strength. Eel stiffened. "Don't touch her," she warned. Voice sharp, but her hands trembled from exhaustion. Seth didn't pull away. "She's strong," he said simply, letting the tiny hand keep its hold. The girl hesitated and gave the smallest nod as if allowing it. Her violet eyes glistened, though she forced the tears back. "If she eats worm, she lives. I don't care about me." "You should," Seth said, voice low. "I can repay," she insisted quickly, thrusting the doll forward. "I clean, I sweep. I don't break things. And this, take it." He looked at the toy in her hands. The stitching was careful, not sloppy. He thought of his own mother, teaching him to patch socks before the war. Her hands steady, her voice telling him patience mattered. The memory cut sharp, so he pushed it down. He closed her small hand back around the doll. "No child pays with memories," he said, her lips pressed together, frowning. "Trades are fair. If it isn't fair, it's a lie." "Then this isn't a trade," he said. "This is me feeding you." The plaza air went still between them. She searched his face, weighing him against every broken promise adults had ever made her. The infant whimpered, a dry, hungry sound, and Eel's shoulders slumped. Still, she refused to beg. Seth made his decision. He rose, pack heavy on his shoulder. "Come on," he said. She blinked. "Where? Shelter, food?" The merchants had been watching, whispering. Some muttered about wasted rations. Others simply stared, eyes narrowed. Seth ignored them. Eel's grip on the doll tightened. Suspicion still braced in her stance. "They'll say you're weak," she whispered. "Let them." Seth said. For a long moment she measured him, then she lifted Nellie higher and stepped forward. They crossed the plaza side by side. She walked stiff-kneed, conserving energy, always poised to bolt if he betrayed her. He didn't blame her. Trust would not come quickly. At the edge of the square, a frost-coated steel beam stretched over the canal. Seth went first, testing each step, then held out his hand. She froze, staring at it, suspicion written across her face. Finally, she placed her small arm in his grip. His hand was firm, steady, not pulling, just enough to keep her balance. On the far side, he pointed to a ruined tram garage. "There, I keep a room above. It's safe." She swallowed hard, still wary. "If we go, I carry my own bag." "You will," Seth said, "and I keep the doll. That's yours." Her shoulders eased, but only slightly. They walked on, the cold gnawing at their bones. Merchant's eyes followed until the frost bridge swallowed them from sight. In the lantern light, as the doll shifted against her chest, its blue shard caught the fire's glow and clicked softly, a faint tick. Of memory no one heard but the night itself. The stovepipe ticked faintly as metal expanded, fighting off the night cold. Seth moved through the room in clipped, clear motions, feeding kindling, setting the kettle, making sure each sound carried no hint of hidden danger. The tram garage loft was bare bedroll, low table, wash basin, crates turned into shelves, but it was warm enough that the frost had not yet crept inside. Eel stood just inside the door, her small shoulders braced, as though expecting the warmth to come with a price. She clutched Nellie close, the infant's faint breath whispering against her collarbone, and kept the doll pinned under her arm, as if afraid he might snatch it the moment she blinked. "You can wash," Seth said, placing the basin on the crate, and pouring a mug of hot water to take the bite off. "Only if you want." Her eyes narrowed, searching for the trap. "I'll wash after she drinks." He nodded. "Fair." He ground dried broth into the boiling water, stirred, and cooled. A small portion in a chipped cup. Eel unwrapped Nellie with practiced care, revealing thin violet skin stretched too tightly over tiny ribs. She held the baby upright, her own exhaustion trembling through her arms. Seth crouched, holding the cup at the infant's lips, guiding the tilt with 2 fingers, while Eel steadied her sister's head. The first swallow went down, the second. Too quickly, so he lowered the rim by half a finger and waited. The baby breathed, then swallowed again. Eel matched his rhythm without needing instruction. Relief flickered across her sharp little face, tension melting for an instant. "Good girl," she whispered. "It's warm." Seth poured a second cup. He slid it toward her. "Yours now." "After her," she said automatically, then caught his gaze, testing if he would argue. "No point in one of you fainting while the other eats," he said. "Drink." She sniffed at the steam, wary, then sipped. She swallowed slowly, controlling herself so hunger wouldn't turn to pain. Her mouth softened. "It tastes like it isn't going to end fast." "Good," Seth said. He ladled more into the pot. For the first time since he had found her, the edge of feral vigilance dulled. But the question still lived in her eyes, unspoken. He answered before she could give them voice. "Bathrooms down the back stairs. Gray bucket, not blue. Blue is clean water. If I leave, I hang the key on that hook. If you wake and I'm gone, check the stove. If it's warm, I'm near. If it's cold, I'm late, and you go to the wire cell in the square. She knows me there." She studied him, not the stove, not the hook, but his face weighing his steadiness. Finally, she asked, "Do you bring many people here?" "No," he said. "I try not to bring anyone here. Easier that way." He glanced at Nelly. Easier isn't always right. Eel considered that. "What do you want for it?" "You'll tell me the truth," Seth said. "If you break something, you say so. If you're hungry, you say so. You don't trade the doll, and you don't trade yourself. Ever." He held her gaze. She didn't flinch. "If you get angry, you say it with words, not hands." "Agreed," Seth said simply. Something shifted in her then. Her jaw eased, and for a moment she looked smaller, younger than the hardened mask she wore. She broke the flatbread he gave her, pushing the larger half toward his side. Equal. He took the smaller piece without comment. She ate with measured care, chewing slowly, the way someone who had learned too well how fast food could disappear. The kettle hummed. The pipe clicked. For the first real minutes, they sat together as people who were not outside. When they had finished, Seth pulled out a small tin and set it on the crate. Inside lay 4 candles, a roll of gauze, a needle, thread, a bar of soap, and a whistle. He held the whistle out to her. "Only for danger. If you blow it, I move. If I'm gone, someone else will." She tested the weight in her palm, serious. As an elder making a pact, "I won't waste it." She threaded the cord through her wrap, hiding the whistle against her collarbone like a fact carved in stone. "We need rules," she said. To his surprise, she went first. "I don't open the door alone. I don't light the stove unless you show me. If I break something, I say. If I'm scared, I say. If you leave, you tell me where and when." "Good rules," Seth said. He added his own. "You sleep before I do. I take first watch. If you wake and see me asleep, you wake me if anything sounds wrong. You never doubt that part." "I never doubt that part," she echoed, her voice steady and the repetition made. "It a promise." The hardness in her violet eyes didn't vanish, but warmth lived alongside it now. She placed the doll beside her sister on the bedroll, covering the shard with a strip of cloth she tied tight. The blue fragment gleamed once before it vanished beneath fabric, and in the quiet that followed, Seth felt the walls he had built around himself shift, just slightly, as the sound of the stove filled the room. The refinery ruins loomed against. The gray horizon, jagged steel rising like the ribs of some long-dead beast. Seth moved carefully, lantern light cutting through dust and ash as he ducked beneath a fractured arch. Most scavengers avoided this place. They whispered of collapsing beams and walls that groaned like dying animals whenever the wind pressed too hard. Danger, yes, but danger often meant things left untouched. And Seth needed salvage. Milk powder and cloth would not last forever. Not with 2 new mouths to feed. The air inside the shrine was thick with damp stone. His boots sank into ash, scattered across broken tiles. Fragments of painted glass littered the floor, shattered remnants of once sacred mosaics. A faint hum of wind pushed through cracks, rattling cloth scraps that hung like forgotten banners. He swept the lantern higher, searching for copper, steel, anything worth carrying. Then the light caught movement. He froze, every muscle coiling. Not scavenger, not animal. A body lay against the wall, half buried in rubble. Long white hair spilled. Across cracked stone, tangled with dirt and dust. Her skin pale violet, like Eel's was dulled by grime. Torn ceremonial wraps clung to her frame, thin fabric frayed and exposing the sharp outlines of ribs. For a moment, he thought she was already gone. Then her chest rose, shallow, barely there. He knelt quickly, setting the lantern near. Her eyes fluttered open at the glow, violet irises sharp even in weakness. Instinct flickered in her features, an urge to pull back, to shield herself, but her body had no strength left to move. Her lips parted. The word came broken, but clear. "Enough, children." Seth's jaw tightened. He understood at once. She meant Eel and Nayli. He kept his voice plain, wasting no energy on gentleness or lies. "They're safe, with me." Relief trembled through her face, softening pride into something closer to peace. A sound escaped her, half cough, half laugh. Her hand twitched against the rubble. "Then, take me." "I cannot walk." Seth didn't hesitate. He slid arms beneath her frail body, lifting her carefully. She weighed too little, bones pressing sharply against his coat. Her head fell weakly against his shoulder, but her fingers clutched his collar out of instinct, not choice. He stood, adjusting his grip, testing each step across shifting stone, until the broken shrine was behind them, and the night air hit his lungs again. The walk back to the tram garage felt longer than usual, every step a reminder of the weight he had chosen. The woman in his arms was not just another mouth to feed, she was kin to the children, a thread to a past he knew nothing about, but leaving her had never been an option. His rules were few, and one of them had already brought him here. Don't leave people to die in piles of stone. When he reached the stairwell, the door creaked open before he touched it. Eel stood there, the doll clutched tight under her arm, Nayli bundled in her sling. Her violet eyes widened when she saw the woman in Seth's arms. She froze, every muscle locked. Then her voice broke sharp, defensive, raw. "You'll forget us now. You'll only look at her." The frail woman stirred at the words, turning her head just enough to face the girl. Her voice cracked, but carried something undeniable. "No one forgets. The child who carried her sister through winter." Eel's breath caught the fight, in her stance faltering. She stepped forward, but suspicion still held her tight. She did not drop her guard, even when Seth carried the woman inside and lowered her gently onto the bedroll. He pulled another blanket from the trunk, tucking it around her shoulders, then stoked the stove until the iron pipe roared again. Heat filled the room, chasing out the brittle cold. Nayli stirred at the noise, small fists pressing weakly against Eel's chest. Seth glanced at the girl, steady as ever. "She needs water. Warm, not hot, you know how." Grateful for the task, Eel nodded quickly, moving to the kettle. But her eyes never left Seth, as if still waiting for the moment he would shift his attention away from them. He didn't. One hand rested against the older woman's shoulder, checking her breathing, but his gaze followed Eel's movements. He wanted her to see her place was not lessened. The woman's lips moved again, soft as a whisper. "My name, Saint Ira." "You're safe here, Saint Ira," Seth said. His tone was calm, final. She gave the faintest smile before sleep claimed her again, breath shallow but steadier now. Silence filled the room, broken only by the hiss of the stove and Nayli's small sounds. Eel set the cup down, her jaw working as if chewing words too heavy to speak. At last, she whispered the question that had burned in her since Seth carried the woman inside. "Are we still yours, or are we hers now?" Seth met her eyes without, flinching. "You're not things. You're not owned. You're here because I said you'd be fed and kept warm. That doesn't change." Her lips pressed thin, suspicion fighting against hope. She looked down at Nayli, then at the doll, and finally back at him. She didn't answer with words, but her grip on the toy eased. For the first time, she let herself believe him, if only for tonight, that the markets of District 12 were never truly silent. Even in ruin, even after winters of collapse, there were always whispers traders, muttering over stripped wiring, scavengers, weighing copper bundles, men who warmed their hands on trash fires and measured the weight of strangers with hungry eyes. Seth walked through it all without breaking stride, his pack steady, his gaze fixed forward. Beside him, Eel carried her sister in a sling tight against her chest, the patchwork doll pressed between them like a shield. Her new boots scuffed lightly on the cracked stone, too big by half, but better than the shredded pair she'd cut down from her mother's shoes. She felt the stairs. She always did. They clung like frost on skin, biting and bitter. A voice rose from the crowd. "Humans feeding strays now," a man jeered. Laughter followed, thin and mean. Seth didn't answer. His silence was iron, but Eel's jaw clenched. She held Nayli closer, chin up, the words burning in her throat. Seth leaned just enough for her to hear. "They want a show. Not giving one starves them faster." She bit back her retort, chewing on it like stale bread. She didn't like ignoring. Ignoring felt like surrender. But she forced herself to keep walking. Beside him, her steps fell into rhythm, each one a small victory against the pull to lash out at the stall. Seth traded wire bundles and a repaired lantern for milk powder, cloth, and oil. The merchant's gaze slid from Seth to the child, and her doll. His lip curled. "That blue piece," he said, nodding toward the shard sewn into the toy's stitched face. "Good salvage. I'll buy it." Before Eel could answer, Seth's voice cut in, flat and final. "Not for sale." The trader smirked, leaning forward. "Everything's for sale. Not this." Seth's eyes didn't waver. He didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten, simply stood with the kind of steadiness that made men look away. The stall went quiet. The deal closed without further talk. Back in the loft that night, the stove hummed with a steady fire. St. Ire sat propped against the wall, her strength returning piece by piece, her violet eyes glinting in the light. She said little, but her presence shifted the air of the room. Her voice carried weight, even when faint, the cadence of someone who had once been obeyed. Eel hovered between her and Seth like a wary sentinel, watching every glance, every pause. She placed the doll beside her sister, but when the shard caught firelight and gave its soft click, she snatched it back, clutching it tight. St. Ira noticed. Her voice rasped, dry with thirst. "That shard? It is not scrap. It sings sometimes." Eel admitted, reluctant. "It broke." The older woman's eyes sharpened with something beyond hunger. "Not broken. Canterglass, memory lattice, sacred." Eel frowned, clutching it tighter. "It's my mother's. She said it sings her voice." Seth didn't interrupt. He watched, filing the words away like he did with every detail. But inside, the shape of things shifted. That doll was no toy, no worthless trinket. It was a key, though to what he couldn't yet see. The night deepened. Eel dozed at last beside her sister, whistle looped around her neck, her hand tangled in the doll's. Cloth. Seth kept his watch near the door, knife at his side. The wind rattled broken shutters, and somewhere below, steps echoed faintly on the stairwell. He didn't move suddenly, but his hand rested near the crate, blade ready. A scuff, a pause, a whisper of weight testing each step. His eyes narrowed, muscles coiling. Then, sharp and piercing, the whistle shrilled. Eel was awake, her small frame rigid, eyes locked on the door. Nayli whimpered against her chest, sensing the fear. Seth rose smoothly, every motion quiet but deliberate, placing himself between the children and the sound. The steps quickened and fled. A trap he'd set rattled loose, wires snapping against. Metal. Whoever it was hadn't stayed to test him further. Silence swallowed the stairwell once more. Seth stayed at the door a long time, listening until even the faint echoes had gone. Behind him, Eel's breathing was quick, harsh in the quiet. She still clutched the whistle tight against her chest. They wanted the shard. Saint Ira whispered from her place against the wall. Her voice carried the weight of certainty. Men with wires. They hunt canterglass. Eel stiffened, eyes darting to Seth, searching for his reaction. He didn't give her comfort. He gave her truth. Then they'll be back. The firelight painted the room in orange and shadow. The doll's shard glowed faintly beneath its cloth. Cover, as if answering the unspoken promise. It was no longer just memory. It was signal. The shard lay on the crate between them, a fragment of blue glass, stitched into patchwork fabric, flickering faintly in the stove's glow. Seth had pried it free of the doll with care, setting the cloth aside, while Eel hovered nearby like a hawk about to strike. Her arms folded tight across her chest, naily bundled in the sling against her ribs. She hadn't said yes, not really. But she hadn't stopped him either. You promised, she reminded sharply, violet eyes fierce. Not before I say. You said tonight, Seth replied, his voice steady, not confrontational. His tools lay open beside the shard, a solder iron powered by a jury-rigged battery, thin wires stripped from scavenged coils, a magnifier scratched but functional. St. Ira sat across from them, her back straight despite lingering weakness. It is canterglass, she said. Her voice, though faint, carried authority. A lattice for memory. It holds songs, codes, places. Many were lost in the fires. She fixed her gaze on Eel. If this was your mother's, then it is more than memory. It is inheritance. The girl's jaw tightened. She pressed her palm over the doll's empty socket, as if protecting it from theft. She said it sang once, then it broke. I never heard the song. Seth leaned closer, adjusting a cracked lens. The shard clicked again as it caught the firelight, a sound like stone striking metal. Not random patterned. He frowned. It's trying to wake. He touched the iron's tip to a solder seam, reattaching a filament so fine it was barely visible. The shard pulsed, a dim glow rippling through it like water disturbed by a stone. A sound filled the room, not quite music, not words, but a vibration low enough to stir dust in the corners. Naily whimpered once, then quieted. Eel's arms tightened around her sister, but she didn't look away from the shard. She looked at Seth instead, eyes wide, a question forming she didn't dare ask aloud. The shard flared again, then projected a thin line of light across the crate. Seth angled the magnifier instinctively, catching it against the wall. Symbols danced in. Pale blue script, wavering but legible. A schematic jagged, incomplete, but unmistakably a design. St. Ira drew in a sharp breath. Hearth array, she whispered. By the canters it lives. Seth glanced back. Explain. It was not just song, she said, voice trembling. Between reverence and sorrow, it is a map. Beneath the bones of Syrian 5 lie Hearth Array's substations of warmth and water, built when this world was still seeded for life. The war silenced them. If the shard still carries its key, one might wake again. The lines shifted, coalescing into coordinates points buried deep beneath the tram garage itself. Seth stared, every instinct sharpening. He had walked this ruin for years, never suspecting power still slept beneath his feet. The shard pulsed once more, and a faint voice rose through static. Not words, but the cadence of a lullaby, cracked and broken by time. Eel froze, her breath caught in her throat. Tears shone, but didn't fall. That's her, she whispered hoarsely. That's my mother. Naily stirred, small hands reaching. Blindly toward the sound, as if she knew it. Seth's chest tightened, though he kept his face still. He adjusted the plate at his neck, the salvaged ID tag that had clinked when the baby first touched it. Something in the shard responded. It's... Glow bent toward the tag, then blinked red. Denied. Not enough, St. Iry murmured, shaking her head. The arrays demand two, a keeper, born of Kentorline, and a warden human blood bound to the old ceasefire codes. Alone, neither can wake it. Together. Her eyes lifted to Seth. Your tag may still speak to their law. The room seemed to shrink around them. Eel clutched her sister tighter, suspicion fighting with the desperate spark in her eyes. If it wakes, it means food? Heat? For her. For all of you, Seth said quietly. He looked at the shard, its glow steady now, waiting. He knew the weight of choices. Knew, too, the danger power like this would draw eyes sharper than any. Hungry traders, but he also knew what it meant to let a child starve when warmth still breathed in the bones of the world. Then we try, he said, dot as if answering. The shard gave a final click, steady and deliberate. Its light widened, drawing a line from the crate to the floorboards of the loft, where frost had gathered in white veins. The schematic's coordinates blinked once, then froze. Directly below them, the hearth array slept beneath their feet. Trapdoor groaned as Seth forced it open, the iron hinges shrieking in protest after years of rust. Cold air rose from below, sharper than the night above, laced with the scent of dust and stale water. The shard's light streamed downward, a thin blue line, pointing into the dark as though urging them onward. Eel clutched Nayli tight against her chest, the doll's empty socket pressed under her chin. Her violet eyes flicked between Seth and the yawning hole. You said safe, she accused softly, suspicion instinctive. It is safer if we wake it, Seth said, steady, his voice a flat stone dropped in still water. Heat, water, food. Without it this district dies slow. Her jaw trembled but held. She adjusted the sling, wrapping her small sister tighter, then set her foot on the first row. Seth moved ahead of her, lantern raised. St. Iry followed last, her ceremonial wraps torn, but her posture unbowed, muttering prayers in the Cantor tongue. The stairwell wound downward into stone, carved long before war. Pipes lined the walls frost, clinging like veins of glass. Symbols etched into the metal pulsed faintly as the shards glow past them, as if recognizing kin. At the bottom, the tunnel opened into a cavern of machines. The hearth array lay dormant at its center, a spire of iron and crystal wrapped in corroded conduits. Its heart dim. The shard leapt from Eel's hand of its own accord, locking into a circular slot at the spire's base. A hum trembled through the floor. Symbols awoke, scrawled in pale blue across the walls, demanding response. Keeper, St. Iry whispered, her voice reverent. The array calls for the Cantor line. She placed her hand on Eel's thin shoulder. You must answer. Eel swallowed, shifting Nayli closer before stepping forward. Her small palm pressed against the glowing lattice. The hum deepened, rising like a heartbeat. Lines of light spread outward, but then halted, shivering on the edge of collapse. A red symbol pulsed across the spire, incomplete. It needs the warden, St. Iry said. Her gaze fell to Seth. Human, ceasefire blood, bound by oath. Your ID plate will decide if it believes you. Seth's hand closed over the tag at his chest. He felt the weight of it, worn thin from years of friction against bone. That plate had once been an anchor to orders, graves, and loss. Now it might be the hinge of survival. He stepped forward and pressed it against the lattice. A shock jolted through him, not pain but recognition. The array's voice filled the chamber, neither human nor Cantor, but both. Warden and keeper must vow, no cycle without covenant. Eel's eyes widened. Vow? The lattice repeated, pulsing brighter. State the oath. Seth looked at the girl. She clutched her sister, chin high despite the tremor in her lip. She had already offered the only thing she owned in this world, a doll stitched from scraps to keep Nellie alive. He thought of her words in the plaza, desperate and defiant. He thought of his own answer. His throat tightened, but the words came steady. No child pays with memories. The array froze. Then the red glow flickered once, turned green, and surged outward. Heat thundered through the conduits, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. Pipes screamed as frozen water cracked and thawed, rushing upward in torrents. The entire cavern bloomed with light. The array was awaked out above. In the ruined district, steam erupted from broken vents. Frost melted from stone. People stumbled into the square, mouths open, eyes wide at the warmth rolling from beneath their feet. For the first time in years, Syrian 5's dead district breathed. But the sound drew others too. Seth heard it before the others. The distant whir of scanners, the metallic buzz of drones. Men with wires, he muttered, voice like steel. He turned toward the stair. They've been waiting for this. Eel's face hardened, fear swallowed by resolve. She clutched the doll again, as if it could shield her. They'll come for us. They'll come for this, Seth corrected, gesturing at the array. His jaw tightened. And we don't let them take it. The light spread further, warm and steady, but already shadows were gathering above. The array's hum rose into a steady roar, vibrating through stone and bone alike. Seth stood at the stairwell mouth, knife drawn, the glow from below painting. His face in shifting blues. Above, the scrape of boots and the whine of machinery bled down into the cavern. The men with wires were coming. Eel pressed Nellie tight against her chest, the doll wedged between them. The shard inside the array pulsed like a heartbeat, answering her presence. Her violet eyes darted between Seth and the machine. Suspicion sharpened into defiance. They'll take it from us, she whispered. Not while I stand, Seth said. His voice carried no fire, only the certainty of stone. The first intruder dropped down the stairwell, landing hard on the platform, his body crisscrossed with cables, goggles flashing, metal claws fitted where fingers should have been. He sneered. At Seth. We smelled Cantor glass. Thought it was a myth. Guess not. More followed, 4, then 6, their movements jerky with half-machine grace. One raised a hooked tool toward the array. Corporate burn starts at dawn. We don't need this one awake. Just rip the shard and sell it. Seth moved before this. Words finished. His knife caught the first man in the throat, sharp and fast. The others surged forward with a snarl. Eel flinched, but did not run. She set Nellie in a sling on the ground, hands trembling, then turned toward the array. St. Ira's voice rose behind her, frail but commanding. Keep her. The array listens. Anchor it now, or all this dies. I don't know how. Eel cried. You. Do, St. Ira answered, eyes burning. You carried your sister through winter. That was your first right. Speak what you want it to be. Seth struck down another, blood flashing dark against blue glow. But for everyone that fell, another. Pressed close. Sparks lit the cavern as claws screeched against stone. Eel's breath came ragged. She pressed her palm against the array. The shard flared, waiting. She squeezed her eyes shut. I don't trade her. I don't trade myself. I don't break promises. I keep her warm. The array answered. Its glow surged, wrapping her in threads of light. The hum sharpened into clarity. Keeper confirmed. The intruders froze for a heartbeat as heat rolled outward, pipes bursting above ground. Steam hissed through cracks, scalding their faces. Seth rammed one back into the wall, blade twisting, then staggered as another slammed his shoulder with a metal claw. The array pulsed again. Seth's ID tag lit, brighter than it ever had. A voice filled the chamber, blending cantor song with the bark of human code. Warden bond confirmed. Covenant sealed. Then came the shock. The array projected not just warmth, but memory. Blue light painted the walls with images fractured, but unmistakable. A woman's face, violet skin luminous, singing a lullaby. Solera, Eel's mother. Her voice spilled through the cavern, soft and aching. Both children stilled, even Nayli's tiny fists unclenching as if she knew it. But the song carried more than memory. Symbols overlaid the projection. Maps, coordinates, a lattice of dormant arrays across Syrian 5, each pulsing like a faint lantern in the dark. The shard had broadcast their bond. The keeper, the warden, the hearthseed. Nayli whimpered. The sound high and sharp. The array's glow bent toward her, threads of light wrapping her small body in warmth. Seth's breath caught. St. Ira's voice trembled with awe. She is the hearthseed, the living anchor. Without her, the arrays cannot stay awake. Eel's eyes widened, arms wrapping protectively around her sister. They'll come for her. They already have, Seth said, slamming his knife into the last intruder's chest. The body hit the floor, twitching. He turned back toward them, chest heaving. And they'll keep coming. Corporate burn will wipe this district clean by dawn. The array pulsed brighter, projecting the map again, each point glowing. Not just survival. A path. Seth wiped blood from his blade, jaw set. Then we don't wait here to die. We light the next one. And the next after that. Eel lifted her chin, stubborn and fierce. If we run together. You don't throw us away. Seth met her eyes. I don't throw people away. Not you, not her, not anyone under this roof. The array's glow dimmed to a steady thrum, as though accepting their vow. Above, the first beams of dawn pushed through cracked stone. But in the square outside, steam rose thick, and for the first time, people gathered not to jeer, but to stand in the warmth. They whispered a new name as the human, the keeper child, the hearthseed infant, and the cantor woman emerged from the stair. Hearthkeepers, Seth scanned the horizon. Far to the east, a sterile glow burned against the clouds, the corporate fire already moving. The shard pulsed in his pocket, the map of arrays still alive within. Alone had been easier. But as he stood with them in the square, warmth spilling from vents, Seth knew easy had never been the point.